We are back. Week 6 betting preview on the PFF NFL show. I'm Ben Linsey. I've got Judah Fortgang with me. Judah, looking at this Week 6 slate, it's got me feeling nicey. How about you?
Oh yeah. First off, I just want to say I hear that music and it just brings a smile to my face. I absolutely love it. We're in a great spot in Week 6, the full thick of football season, and the narrative I'm hearing a lot about is like, oh, the slate's kind of well, boring. Not necessarily even boring so much as like difficult to capture. And that's music to my ears because that's a lot of variance. That's a lot of volatility, a lot of different game scripts that we can kind of touch on, and a lot of opportunity for these tails angles and bets that we love to make. I'm stoked.
Uncertainty means big payouts. That's what we're going to talk through today. So hopefully we can hit a few. And we're going to start with a divisional game. Thursday Night Football, a good one. It seems like the Thursday Night Football slate's been better this year, to be honest. That's usually a bunch of bad games, but we've got some good ones this year. 49ers at Seahawks. San Francisco's 3.5-point favorites on the road, 48.5-point total. Both teams coming off disappointing losses. San Francisco to Arizona, Seattle to the Giants, both looking for a bounce back on a short week. And I kind of wanted to start out with a philosophical question. So I was looking at the Seattle offense. They've been pretty pass heavy. So if you look at neutral game situations, which there's better ways to do it with win probability, but just throwing on some quick filters, early downs, first 3 quarters, a 1-score game, they have the highest pass rate in the league, 65%. But you've got this kind of qualitative part to it where Kenneth Walker in last week had 4 or 5 carries, whatever it was. So Mike McDonald's getting a bunch of questions on why you're not running the ball. He said, we all know we need to run the ball more. Everybody knows that. Our opponents know that. Our players in our locker room know that. Ryan Grubb knows that. Our coaches do. I do. So when you have like kind of that narrative angle tied that conflicts with the actual data that we have that says they're a super pass heavy team, how do you sort through that going into the next week?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting question. And we get into like stated preference versus revealed preference, the stated preference being like the thing that the coaches are saying and the revealed preference being the data. But this is an interesting situation because we don't really have a like reliability indicator, if you will, of like the coach speak here, right? It's a new offensive coordinator. It's a new head coach. For all we know, this is like the type of situation where they are going to change a little bit. I tend to think and lean heavily towards like what we've actually seen is relevant, even and like this is something that's actually, I don't know why this comes to mind, but in the Monday Night Football game, the Saints clearly wanted to emphasize or reduce Alvin Kamara's workload, right? They were giving Jamal Williams some snaps, and the coaches in the pressers leading up to the game had talked about that and had even said like, oh, we need to give Kamara less work, but he's the type of guy that in a close game just doesn't want to be taken out. Right, so the plan was for Alvin Kamara to take a little bit more of a backseat to Jamal Williams, but like for whatever game script reason, that wasn't able to happen. So like the coaches can be like, okay, we need to get Kenneth Walker the ball, and maybe they'll emphasize him on like the first drive or 2, and then just like the game's going to happen, and you're probably going to default back to the data or what the data is capturing, your default, so to speak, quicker than you realize. So even if they do. And that isn't to say that like they can't focus on the run, but I think there's some reason beyond just like an emphasis on the pass that Seattle is the pass heaviest team in the league. And even if they do try and emphasize it, it might still rear its head for whatever reason.
Yeah, and especially in what I expect to be a negative game script. If you look at the other side of the ball, we talked early in the season about how good Seattle's defense looked. And I think I've got a little bit less confidence in that unit. They had played some bad offenses the last couple weeks. The Giants were able to move the ball on them. And their overall defensive numbers have taken a hit, and specifically some of the areas that San Francisco really wants to attack. We talked about it with the Dolphins a little bit in that early game against the Bills. It's that intermediate window between the numbers. Brock Purdy has more passing yards in that part of the field than any quarterback in the NFL this season. Seattle has given up the second most passing yards in that 10 to 19 yard downfield between the numbers kind of range. And you look at some of the injuries they have up front. They're still dealing with some injuries to their front. You've got some injuries at the second level. I just think that's an area where they're going to have trouble stopping San Francisco. And if they're moving the ball, we already know Seattle's been pass heavy, regardless of what they say about trying to get the run game more involved. I don't know if they're going to be able to in this game.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And you highlighted something, I think kind of week 4, the game against the Lions, also a primetime game, right? Monday night. Everyone was watching. It was kind of like this test of like, okay, Seattle's done great through 3 weeks, but they played a kind of poor slate of opponents. Like, how are they going to fare? And they got cooked in the middle of the field. I mean, Jared Goff did not have any completion. They could not tackle. These are the exact sort of problems that can really haunt you against a team like San Francisco. And I think you're also right to highlight, like, these defensive injuries matter a lot. They're missing 2 defensive tackles right now. Tariq Woolen did not practice. He's probably going to miss. Like, this matters. And even if they can return to form later in the season when they're healthy, right now they're not the type of defense that they were the first 3 weeks. And I think to your point, it is exactly in the area where they are weakest is precisely the areas where San Francisco is strongest. And I think that they're getting a lot healthier, right? They've got their full complement of weapons back outside of McCaffrey. And I agree with you that this could be a real troublesome spot. And the market is certainly pricing in Seattle as still like a combination of the defenses we've seen. This like really bad unit from the past 2 weeks and the good unit from the previous 3 weeks before that. But I think the truth lies probably somewhere in between, but a little bit closer to what we've seen in recent form, given the injuries and given the matchup they have against San Francisco.
Yeah, and for that reason, I think my favorite kind of side bet is 49ers over 26.5 team total right now. I just think they're going to be able to put up points in this matchup. I like Purdy. It's tougher to kind of tell where that receiving volume is going to go if you like them as a passing offense now that they're healthier. I was looking through Kittle's numbers against Seattle in recent years. He's had a lot of success against them. Last 3 games in Seattle, 16 catches on 22 targets for 293 yards and 4 touchdowns. And if you look at the Seahawks defense, they've allowed the 4th most yards to tight ends so far this season. So I think it's a good Kittle spot, in addition to just being an overall advantageous spot for the 49ers passing offense. But what do you think on the other side of the ball? Because I know we talked about the run-pass splits a little bit. Do you think Seattle's going to be able to kind of keep pace and create a game like we saw against Detroit maybe, where it's high scoring and it ends up being fairly close?
Yeah, I think so. And this is a San Francisco team itself dealing with injuries, but also that has struggled in kind of most areas on defense, both the rush defense and if you want to look at metrics like EPA, PFF grade, they're towards the bottom of the league. Yards per attempt, the 10th worst yards per attempt allowed. Whatever, you can choose your metric. And it will kind of reveal that story. I think really you were right to lead with the question of like the run game. I think that's going to dictate not only the outcome, but also like the type of the game script. Right? I like to talk about game scripts a lot. Of like we like to talk about these matchups and how these games can play out. And I think it would be unsurprising to see kind of multiple directions. It would be unsurprising to see a game like the Detroit side where Seattle really is just like going punch for punch with them. It also would be unsurprising for me to see them like lean on the run, maybe even have some success, slow the game down, not allow Purdy to put up huge numbers and kind of win that way. Or we can just get like somewhere in between of like they try and rely on the ground game. It doesn't work. They fall into a like very bad game state, are playing from behind. San Francisco has been vulnerable in those areas, right? We certainly saw that against Arizona last week. Even I saw a great chart by I think it was Robbie Greer, like looking at a curve of like expected win probability and actual win probability. And of course, there's a ton of survivorship bias in there. But like Kyle Shanahan is notably bad in these like spots where he has big leads, and it's certainly an outlier for a coach who's had as much success as he has had. So I think there are tons of different angles in this game. And certainly when I think about it, and I agree with you on the betting side, the thing that almost seems most stable to me is San Francisco's ability to score. And the Seattle side just presents a whole bunch of question marks.
Yeah, it's tough to sort through. I've been kind of on the San Francisco run defense is beatable again, it has to be a game script where that you can actually take advantage of that. I was actually last week, I had a Kyler rushing Cardinals money line same game parlay that was close. Connor was a little bit off, but I got the idea down, just didn't hit. But yeah, so if they're it's kind of even, or Seattle's able to stay in the game, I could see a situation where Walker goes off. I'm with you that the most stable side is betting on the San Francisco offense, and I'm kind of more hesitant to go heavy on anything Seattle just because I could see it going a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's I also am just like very curious about how Seattle's operating their offense generally. Right, like I mean, and Grubb talked about this in one of his pressers about like, we need to run the ball to like establish more play action, but they're not doing it at all, which is kind of interesting. And they're also attacking a lot of these kind of like 10-yard these seam routes and these curls, which like San Francisco has generally been very good at over the middle of the field. And Fred Warner's questionable for this game. I'm anticipating that he's going to play, but I think that's also an injury that matters a lot. I'm just kind of curious if they, in an attempt to also kind of get the run game more integrated, they change their style of offense a little bit and take more of these deep shots, throw a little bit more of these crossers, attack more of these kind of boundary. They have the talent on the boundary, right? It's not as though they're like devoid of guys who can win on the outside. DK Metcalf can certainly win on the outside. I'm just curious, and this is why I'm certainly not betting anything on the medians here, of just like there is a world of possibility where the San Francisco offense just looks materially different in every way in this game.
Yeah, and to your point, they've been heavy on those like stick routes, quick hitches. We talked about it a little bit going into the Detroit game. They spread things out to go empty a decent amount, and they're just trying to find space. San Francisco has typically been a really good defense in terms of limiting yards after the catch. That hasn't been the case as much this year. So to your point, like where do you get yards after the catch? It's typically routes working across the field horizontally. So more of those crossers, more of those slants. And that's something that you think of DK Metcalf as this big vertical ball winner, which he is. But he's been good kind of on those in-breaking routes the last few years especially. So it's an interesting side. I don't have a great read on it, so I'm probably going to stay away. But I'll be relatively heavy on the San Francisco offense, I think, in this game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think kind of my favorite to recap my kind of SGP thoughts here. I think we can see, and maybe I want to capture this, like Seattle has some success on the ground, but San Francisco is still just too much on defense. And maybe some Kenneth Walker rushing alts with San Francisco is the play there. But it kind of, as we said, a lot of different game scripts. You can get very creative, I think, in these SGP builds. Certainly if you have one conviction in one game path over another.
For sure. Next one we're going to is an exciting one. It's the top two offenses in the NFL in terms of EPA per play through the first 5 weeks of the season. If you had said the Baltimore Ravens were in that group, I would have pretty easily believed you coming into the year. If you had said the Washington Commanders were in that group coming into the season, I probably would not have. I would have thought you were crazy. But that's where we are. And Jaden Daniels has continued to improve week over week, and basically every number you look at points to the idea that it's legit, and he's just playing really good football right now.
Yeah, no, that's right. I texted someone earlier this week that these were the two units that I was most wrong on. I thought Washington was going to be an absolute train wreck, and I thought Baltimore was way overrated. I think Lamar Jackson's having his best year, and then obviously Jaden Daniels has emerged. I'd also just say, right, we look at rankings all the time, and they're relevant. It's not just that Washington and Baltimore are number one and number two. There's a big gap between these teams, right? Like Washington is averaging, certainly in the passing offense, they're nearly double as good as Baltimore. Like, I don't think the degree to which Washington has been great on offense can kind of be overstated, understated. I never know which one it is. But to your point, I think that is the central question of this game. And it's like the market is kind of pricing Washington as the kind of 10th best offense in the league. But I have every reason to believe that this is an offense that is, if not the best offense in football, is going to be a top three unit. And I would just say to your point that you can look at kind of EPA. I think EPA is a great metric. I think it has plenty of flaws. And you can kind of create subcategories of EPA, right? Like you can have EPA versus the blitz, EPA versus single high, EPA under pressure, EPA this, EPA that. Those are all valuable. I'm not saying they're not valuable, but there is some world of possibility where like there is something that is captured in the statistic EPA that is just going to kind of overweight how good Washington's been. So I kind of went out to say like, okay, can we make a case for Washington that is like devoid of EPA, devoid of like PFF style? I mean, I think PFF grades are a better like future indicator of things like EPA. And what keeps coming back to me is that like when you do break up the game into its different component parts, and again, you can do this a million different ways, but one that I like to do, as we talk about all the time here, is like plays that are kind of in structure where there's no external factor from the defense. And not only has he been great in those spots from an EPA perspective, because obviously he's been great. Their EPA is best in the league. They're going to be great in a lot of subcategories. But he's doing a great job at track something called destroy rate, which are plays either a throw to a receiver who's not open, a throwaway, a scramble for negative expectancy, or a sack. He is only behind Patrick Mahomes right now in his destroy rate. Not only that, though, he's done a great job.
That's not a bad spot to be.
Right, not a bad spot to be in, and an incredibly impressive spot to be in as a rookie. Too. And also, it's like, look, I'm not a like film guy in the same way. You know way more about kind of the X's and O's, in general, more about football, but whatever. Like you can see it on film, right? You can see that this is a guy who like is getting good reads, is very confidently. Like if nothing's open, he's just like he's scrambling. Then he's not looking to run. He's just making great decisions. He still has some problems with the sacks, but you can see that on film. And then I guess to kind of finish the point here, he's also done a great job. And I think kind of the way that I like to best capture this, and it's admittedly flawed, but I think kind of captures a lot of what we're looking at, is plays where is either going to be good like coverage or pressure is going to come such that it disrupts the play from ever developing. Number one, he has one of the lowest disruption rates, which I think is a product of his processing. And then when inevitably you're going to like lose a left tackle is going to get beat within 1.7 seconds. It's going to happen. When that does happen, he's been great from an EPA perspective. We know that. But also he is what I call create rate, which are throws to open receivers or scrambles for positive yards. When the play does break down, he's been awesome. And I think it's all just pointing to this reality of like, no matter how you break up the game from like a kind of top-down view, it's not only has he been great from a production standpoint, but he's not like relying on crazy fluky plays, right? He's not just like hitting on a bunch of high variance, like explosive success that is kind of making that EPA much higher than it is. He's doing this in a way that I think is sustainable, and I think it's also like it's noticeable when you're watching. Like it's one thing to, and the data backs it up. That I'm sold. I have the Commanders Kool-Aid, and that is like coming from a person who could not have been lowered on Jaden Daniel coming into the season.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. My biggest concern, and we talked about it a little bit earlier this season, was in college when he moved outside the pocket, he wasn't looking to throw. One of the lowest attempt rates anytime he got outside the pocket. You saw that in the first couple weeks. The last 3 weeks, it's been better, right? He's keeping his eyes downfield more. He's hitting some of those big plays. We have, when a quarterback is moved off his spot, weeks 1 to 2, he had 6 yards per dropback on those plays, 8th in the NFL. Still not bad because of that scrambling ability. It always gives you a floor. The last 3 weeks, that's gone up to 7.5 yards, which is highest in the NFL. On those plays, he's 9 of 10, 136 yards passing, so hitting some big plays through the air. 4 sacks taken and 17 scrambles for 125 yards. So he's making the right decision, right? And it's not always running. He's hitting some of those downfield over-the-shoulder throws. That was a huge part of his game at LSU, hitting Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, who, unsurprising, they're both studs in the NFL already. That's a great 1-2 punch to have at the college level. But he's hitting some of those to De'Ami Brown and Terry McLaurin the last couple weeks. So it's been impressive. And to tie it into this game, Baltimore's defense has been beatable, especially their pass defense. I mean, the Bengals put up 38 points last week. I know the Bengals have a good offense as well, but we've seen teams be able to have success against this Baltimore defense. And with how well this Washington offense is playing, and even some of the improvements we've seen from units like their pass rush on defense, we've kind of just been penciling in Washington as just a terrible defense, and I think in a lot of respects they probably still are. But I think they have enough firepower that they probably shouldn't be 6.5-point dogs in this game.
Yeah, I'm with you here. And I love the tails here just because of where I think the offense could go. But I think you bring up some interesting points on the matchup front. I think the clear script here for Baltimore, let's say, if I were to make the case for Baltimore, it's that they've done a terrific job stopping the run. Right? We haven't seen Jaden Daniels, and that isn't to say that like Washington can't overcome that. They've also been great against the run, and that is in no small part to the gravity that Jaden Daniels carries. But say the Baltimore run defense plays extremely well. We have Daniels in a lot of these obvious passing situations, and they get to he still takes too many sacks. He's a great player in total, but there is a world of possibility where we just get instead of the usual 20% sack rate that you can live with, it's 40% in this game, and it kind of spirals from there. Washington on defense, and this is where I think it's interesting, they cannot stop the run. That's a problem. But I think where they have gotten a lot better is in their pass rush. And very quietly, Dorrance Armstrong's having top 10, top 5 statistical season at pass rush. And that's kind of what you need in the NFL to get going. And there's a lot of talk about and it's almost taken for granted how bad this Washington defense is, but they can generate a pass rush. And sometimes that can hide some of the weaknesses. And again, it's all relative to what is being implied from a market perspective, or just how one generally thinks about the team, right? They're not going to be a top 10 defense, but they might be closer to 20th best, which is a world of a difference in seeing how games can play out.
Yeah, and just throw out there, I don't want to overreact to the fact that they played the Cleveland Browns last week. that passing offense, it's rough. It's rough to watch. So
can you think of a unit worse?
No, I can't. So that definitely gives the numbers a boost. To the running point with Baltimore and being able to run on Washington, which I think they can. But one interesting thing when looking at when the Ravens run the ball, when the Ravens have been leading or tied this year, their run rate is 57%. That's 4th highest in the NFL. When they're trailing by any amount, it's 25%, which is 28th in the NFL. And that's, you kind of see they get away from it when they're in these, they have to chase points, and they get away from going to Derrick Henry. You saw it against Cincinnati a little bit last week where he really didn't do much, and I think Cincinnati really put an emphasis on getting more bodies in the box and taking away the run. It's a divisional opponent who knows Baltimore really well, and Anarumo's done that against the Ravens pretty consistently. But if Washington's able to kind of put up some points early, it's something that the Ravens won't take advantage of, the advantage they have in the run game, based on what we've seen from them in terms of run-pass rates through the early part of the season.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is kind of a theme we've touched on of the fragility of game scripts and a particular angle of saying it was a very common, I heard this all the time, of just right, is it Derrick Henry's just going to run on Cincinnati? That's it. Their rush defense is bad. They obviously sold out to stop the run, and the game turned out very different. They were trailing the entirety of the time, which is why it opens up spots for live angles, whether it's props like you're mentioning now, because the median that's priced in initially is, and where the live props are going to be updating from, is going to kind of assume a neutral situation, and their tendencies change. But I think you're right to point out that and I think the game script's going to matter a lot here, and I think it matters a little bit more from the Ravens side, right? I think Washington should be able to score no matter what. Granted, there's a scenario like I outlined earlier where that's not true, but I think that's what it comes down to, and I don't think that this Baltimore defense is going to do anything to disrupt Daniels in a way that he hasn't seen yet before, right? This is not a great defense right now.
Just to recap this game before moving on, what I like as far as angles, I like Commanders plus 6.5. I like some of the tails and the alts that you kind of hit on as well. And if I'm in on the Washington passing attack, I think the player I'm most excited about, which might be a little bit off the wall, is Luke McCaffrey. Because you look at
top separator.
Yeah. His separation numbers are great. He hasn't been targeted a ton, but the theory is if he's separating at a high level, those will come. And it's also a better matchup for him than some of the guys on the outside because the Baltimore pass defense as a whole has been susceptible. But if you look at separation numbers and advanced coverage grades for the Ravens' two outside corners in Marlon Humphrey and Brandon Stevens, both of those guys have been playing well. Where the Ravens have been hurt is over the middle of the field to slot receivers and tight ends. McCaffrey is their primary slot option along with Zach Ertz. Jamar Chase's two big touchdowns last week both came from the slot. All right, so I think this is a spot where I'm going to be betting on a Luke McCaffrey breakout of sorts.
I like it. Yeah, shocker. I like Washington odds here. And I like Daniels passing with that. Even I saw Marlon Humphreys in a boot in practice today. I think he's questionable at best for this spot, which I think kind of, to your point, that they've been pretty solid on the outside, solidifies the case for Washington. But yeah, that's probably my favorite SGP of the week. But not be surprised to see a more detailed write-up on PFF.com later this week, kind of outlining the case for Daniels, Alts, and Washington Alts as well.
Run it back. You hit on it last week, didn't you?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, there we go. Moving on to one of the late afternoon games. Lions at Cowboys. Lions are 3-point favorites, 52.5 point total in this game. Lions are coming off a bye. Dallas coming off the very late East Coast finish against Pittsburgh. Luckily, I was in Pacific time for the end of that one, but thoughts and prayers to those who weren't.
Some of us got home at 1:45 a.m. After that one.
It was a long day of football. You got the grind from Cal Miami to London to Steelers Cowboys. That was a full shift in there.
As I like to say, we're very blessed. There are days in the spring where I'll be longing for, a 24-hour day of football, or with a little bit of 4 hours of sleep there after the college late ends.
Absolutely, we love it. But Lions Cowboys in this matchup, I think it's the Cowboys defense. There was a lot of talk early in the season about this is the worst run defense anyone has ever seen in their life, and it was pretty bad. It's gotten better the last 2 weeks against the Giants and the Steelers. I am kind of the belief that is more of a Giants and Steelers thing. And Dallas has done some stuff schematically to try to take away the run. Specifically, you're seeing a lot more single high from them in the last couple weeks. Mike Zimmer has always been a pretty big two high guy. 53% from 2014 to 2021 with the Vikings. That was that's his single high coverage rate. That was the second lowest in the NFL. You look at this year with the Cowboys, it's up to 64%. That's fifth highest in the league. And it's something that's kind of crept up week over week. And you can kind of tie it to the run defense was bad. Okay, we're going to bring an extra body down the box to help out, especially against the Giants and the Steelers. That being said, Detroit is a whole different animal in terms of how well they can run the ball. One of the best offensive lines in the league, the best running back duo in the league with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. And I think you're going to see a situation where Detroit is going to be able to do what they want on offense in this game.
I'm totally with you there. And I think the Giants rushing offense is actually kind of maybe sneaky good. But I think to your point about the single high stuff, you can get away with that a little bit more, and they almost didn't against the Giants. Like Daniel Jones could not hit on a deep throw in that game, and like playing against Justin Fields with, they didn't even play George Pickens much, but no one who's really a downfield threat for the Steelers. It's an entirely different ballgame when you're going up against the Lions. The splits, by the way, of like single high versus two high. I think I posted this graph earlier this week. Like Jared Goff has been, I think, top 5 in EPA per play against single high. That's been well below average against two high. I'm curious if they kind of change up the personnel usage there. But then again, it's also like Detroit does primarily want to run the ball. And if you don't play single high, they're going to run down your throat. And I think that kind of gets to the core kind of idea that I keep coming back to. Is like, no matter how Detroit wants to play this, it almost seems like they have the advantage. right? It's like the thing I am most confident in is that the Lions, like however they choose to attack, are going to have success.
Yeah, I'm with you. And to the single high point, Jameson Williams is a much bigger big play threat against single high. That's not breaking any ground. He's a fast receiver. If you give him single high opportunities, you can get more opportunity for big plays. But 2.82 yards per out run versus single high this season, 1.35 versus two high. So over double in terms of yards per out run against single high so far this season. Detroit's a team that sees a lot of single high just because of how well they run the ball. And Dallas, they might get Deron Bland back for this game. I saw something that he might start practicing. It still kind of seems like a long shot, but both Trayvon Diggs and Kalen Carson have been towards the bottom of the league in our advanced coverage grades. They allow a decent amount of separation. Like you said, regardless of how Dallas chooses to defend Detroit and how Detroit counters, I think they're going to be putting up points. I think we probably see a Jameson Williams big play, and I think we see success from them on the ground.
Yeah. Oh, no, I think you're right there. I would just kind of clarify, you mentioned the advanced coverage grades. For those unfamiliar, the traditional PFF coverage grades, we're tracking the target, like a cornerback play or secondary play at the time of the target. These advanced grades, you can see this. I post this stuff. I call it like separation prevented. There's also some great content on the site about these advanced grades, are looking at the ability to prevent separation, right? Not just how well you play when you're targeted and on the ball, but on every route, how well you've done. And to your point, Dallas has been for a couple of years now at the bottom of the league. This year, they're the worst, I think, in preventing separation as a team. And you can get away with that when you have Micah Parsons, who's generating pressure like 25% of the time by himself. But when he's out, it becomes a lot more fragile. And I would add those notes when thinking about how the Lions are going to potentially have a lot of success here.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. That's something I should have explained myself. So thank you for jumping in. But that's to the point about the pass rush. That was the whole Trayvon Diggs thing when he intercepted 10 passes or whatever it was. Like, he gave up a ton of yards, but it doesn't matter if you're getting those. Like, getting an extra possession on a turnover is such a valuable thing that the Dallas corners and the way they've played in recent years, you can take chances when your pass rush is getting home in 2.3 seconds, right? You can sit on routes, you can break on things, but if you're playing that way and the pass rush isn't getting home, quarterback can hold on to the ball longer, and next thing you know, you're getting beat over the top because you took a chance on a double move or whatever it is. So I think you're going to see a little bit more of that with Dallas, especially in this stretch without Micah Parsons, without DeMarcus Lawrence, and some of these top guys along their defensive line.
Yeah, I just want to stay here for a little bit because I think you're bringing up some pretty like profound points here that like, and I don't know why I feel the need to like air a little grievance I have. Like, I post a lot of these charts on Twitter, and everyone likes to be like, oh, this chart's the be all end all of this. Like, my quarterback this, my quarterback that. Like, everything in football, basically everything in football is some trade-off of some sort, right? Like, you are going to get better results on ball, but you're maybe going to give up some separation. And these things are constantly changing, and they're not happening in isolation, right? Like, it is incoherent to think about like secondary play as divorced from your pass rush. These things are happening synonymously. The quarterback is reacting to both of these things. And I think when you look at like, and it gets to another point about how you value sample sizes, right? Of like, the Cowboys defense is going to fundamentally be different because they play a certain style with or without Mike Parsons, right? They're going to be fundamentally different depending on whether he's in the game and creating this pass rush, because they are, as you're saying, like, willing to take more risk. And that's probably a good strategy, right? Because the more pressure you get, the more mistakes the quarterback's going to make. It's not just that like any team can do this, but there are certain advantages to having certain players that allow you to perform this way. All of that, I think, is to say, number one, to mention those points, but also just like to point out the gravity of losing Micah Parsons, and to an extent, DeMarcus Lawrence. I don't know why I just blanked for a second. I was thinking Dorrance Armstrong, former Cowboy, whatever. And to an extent, DeMarcus Lawrence also. Like, that matters a lot to how they want to play defense. And I think we're going to need to kind of remove a lot of our priors on the Cowboys defense and kind of take the unit as they are now and on paper. and that's not a particularly good one.
But Judah, that chart I saw it a minute ago. That's the holy grail. That's the only thing that matters.
Exactly.
Let's move over to Dallas offense really quick because we haven't hit on that a ton.
Yeah.
We are expecting the Lions to put up points and move the ball with relative ease. So it's probably going to be a high volume passing game for Dak and the Cowboys offense. I'm just not. So I'm wary of this Cowboys offense and how it's been operating to start the season. There's a ton of tight windows throws for Dak this year. I believe the number is he has 46 tight window throws through 5 weeks. That's 9 more than any other quarterback in the NFL. And that's not a spot you want to be living in. Like, passer rating on tight window throws is around 19. Like, that's bad. You don't want tight window throws ever.
The interception rate is 10 times higher.
Yeah. And to that point, Dak's numbers when he throws into a tight window this year, 7 of 46, 96 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 picks. So it's bad. And I think it's a function of you don't have a run game. You have one high-end receiver in CeeDee Lamb, but then Brandon Cooks is out now. He was your number 2. Jake Ferguson is coming back from injury. He's an above-average tight end, but by no means an elite tight end. And then you're trying to rotate guys like Jalen Tolbert and Kevontae Turpin, who's a returner / gadget guy who's stepping up into a bigger role. And they're not creating a lot of easy throws through scheme, and it's just a spot where Dak has to be perfect and he has to force things. And that's not where you want to be. And even though it's a high volume potential for Dak in this game, I'm just not sold on the Cowboys' ability to keep pace.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And right, like Jalen Tolbert has not been able to separate. He's winning a lot of these kind of contested catch areas, but that's kind of fluky. The one spot that I think or the one path I should say for where I think the Cowboys can have success, you don't run on the Lions. Right, I don't think the Cowboys don't want to run, and you don't try and run the Lions. They're going to pass. The Lions do play a lot of man coverage, right? And as we've talked about a bunch on this show, man coverage is a lot more a reflection of the talent on the field than zone coverage. The better players generally win out, and the targets are a little bit more predictable in that way. And CeeDee Lamb certainly has the matchup advantage there. We've also seen a Dallas team that's been one of the best against man coverage over the last couple of years. It's not a coincidence, I don't think. But it does make it a little bit more narrow, the path to success, right? Because I think the really only script I can see here, unless Dak Prescott's playing just some absolute hero ball, is like CeeDee Lamb to go off, or the defense to, I guess, like throw up a prayer and like hope you get a bunch of turnovers. But I'm curious if the Lions are going to do something schematically, and this is actually something I want to look into more of, like how are teams approaching like bracket coverage against Lamb? How are they doubling them? I can think of like the Giants game where they did a terrific job against Lamb, except for one play where they had Cordero Flott in one-on-one coverage, and what do you know? CeeDee Lamb has a 60-yard touchdown. That stuff just boggles my mind that you like can be in that situation, but nonetheless, it also reveals, I think, an important, like, football games are a couple of plays can really have an outsized influence in how the game goes, and it has all of the setup for a spot where like CeeDee Lamb can go for another long touchdown. Hey, he did it in the week 16 game it was last year. He had a 90-yard touchdown. Again, these things are like generally more likely to happen against man coverage. I think that's kind of the path I would see, is like either Dak Prescott continues to play this sort of hero ball, which I think is incredibly fragile, or we're just seeing like a 250-yard game from CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. No, I'm with you in that I would rather bet on something outrageous for Lamb than like over 85 or whatever the line ends up being. Okay, cool. We're running a little bit long, so I'll try to pick it up. What I'm on for this game, Detroit should be more than 3-point favorites in my opinion. So I'm in on Lions alts, and I also like anything around Jameson Williams big plays, whether that's longest reception, whether that's alt overs, anytime touchdown, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm with you there. That's my favorite angle. Goff to Jameson Williams.
Sweet.
Also maybe like some Detroit stuff as well.
little bit too much agreeing. I feel like we
I was gonna say, where's like that game where I feel like we had a bunch of these spots early in the season where we really disagreed.
Maybe it's this one. I probably not, because I don't have a strong read on this game. So we'll talk it through. Bills at Jets on Monday Night Football. It's the return to the Meadowlands of the Monday night opener last year, where Aaron Rodgers got hurt. Ended up being a good game, punt return touchdown in overtime. So maybe we get back that excitement. But Bills are 2.5-point favorites, 40.5-point total. Had this game been after week 3, these teams would have been riding high. The Jets off that Thursday night win against the Patriots, the Bills off the slaughtering of the Jaguars on Monday Night Football. Both teams are coming off 2 losses, the Jets to the Broncos and to the Vikings in London, Bills to the Ravens and Texans. And I'm more surprised about the Bills and kind of the step back that their offense has taken the last couple of weeks. I'm interested whether you looked into kind of what the underlying causes were and what you think, whether you think it's something fundamental or it's just the fact that they played 2 good teams and it's been a down stretch for Allen in the offense.
Yeah, I don't see anything that kind of jumps out in the data other than the fact that like Khalil Shakir was clearly the number 1 receiver. He's out. They also found themselves again in like particularly bad game scenes. But I think it was more so a function of like the first couple of games they were way outperforming kind of their median performance, right? They're having 90th percentile games. I think these were like kind of 25th percentile games. I don't think that much has changed. I think the Bills are the offense that we know them to be over the last bunch of years, that is like going to be one of the best. They have done this forever, of putting up these like clunkers, right? We had a Bills-Giants game Sunday Night Football last year that like came down to a funky like Darren Waller play, if I remember correctly. Whatever, they put up stinkers. They put up
the Broncos game that got what's his name fired? The offensive coordinator.
Exactly.
Dorsey.
Exactly. That got the Ken Dorsey fired. Yeah. Like they've put up these clunkers and they have that high end too. I'm not too worried about them outside of maybe like it probably matters at this point. First off, they're dealing with a lot of injuries. James Cook's not practicing today. Shakir's not practicing today. Curtis Samuel's not practicing today. At some point, when you lose enough of the wide receiving room, like that starts to matter. But I think overall the offense is probably going to be fine. It's a better question. I'm curious your thoughts here of like how they match up with the Jets defense. And I was ready. All haughty was ready to be like, hey, Jets defense after 2 weeks, they're not as good as they've been in the past. Like we should have a lot of humility in the Jets side of things. And here they are once again putting up kind of top 5 numbers. The pass rush, which I was like, they have no pass rush. Huff is gone. Hassan Reddick refuses to play, and then like Will McDonald kind of emerges out of here. Michael Clemens is having a great season so far. That I think the Jets defense is kind of back to being one of the better units in the game, and I think like matchups matter less to a quarterback like Josh Allen, who can create on his own, and if you're going to extend the play for enough time, your secondary is going to break down or Allen can scramble for enough yardage. But I think on those like sample of kind of like the in-structure plays, you got to downgrade the Bills offense when they're facing a team like the Jets right now.
Yeah, the Jets just reload, man. Jamie Sherwood, someone you didn't bring up, he stepped in for C.J. Mosley and has been great, top 3 graded linebacker for us so far this year. And yeah, I think the Jets defense is legit. Even the game against the Vikings, like they held down the Vikings pretty well, which not a lot of teams have so far this year. And Allen's numbers are worse against the Jets than they are against every other defense. It's not that surprising. The Jets have had a good defense the last couple years. Specifically, the Jets haven't given up anything deep to Allen in the last 5 games that they've played. So going back to 2022, I guess. In the last 5 games against the Jets, Allen on throws 20-plus yards downfield, 3 of 25, 151 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. And that's something that we've seen the last 2 weeks has been a real issue, Allen going anywhere downfield. The lowest completion rate on throws, I believe 10-plus yards downfield of any quarterback in the NFL in weeks 4 and 5. So that's an issue that the Bills have had. Allen's been throwing downfield more. He's been forcing some more back shoulders to Keon Coleman. He's been just missing some of the actual opportunities they had where receivers created separation, like the ball to Matt Collins last week against the Texans, where they got behind him on a double move. Allen just put it too far. It just hasn't been consistent in recent weeks. And if Shakir and Curtis Samuel are out, which there's a chance, it's early. We're recording on Wednesday. We still don't know a lot about injuries for this game, but there's not a lot of diversity in this wide receiver room if that's the case. It's Keon Coleman, Matt Collins, MBS, and then whoever they bring up. I don't even know who the other options would be, but those are like three big outside vertical ball winners, and it's like Dalton Kincaid's the only guy who's going to work the short and intermediate areas of the field. How is that going to work?
Yeah, and I think it's one thing to have that in a matchup against the Jaguars. It's another thing when you got to do this against Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, right? If you're betting on Keon Coleman to win the back shoulder routes against Sauce Gardner, that's not a recipe for success. I don't think. I don't think it's a good matchup for him. Also, I should say, probably does not help that Josh Allen has to be concussed, right? He took an insane hit. First of all, he took a crazy hit in the Baltimore game, and then again last week. Obviously, we saw that. Whatever. I hate to play this game, but I do think it is actually influencing the results here. I don't think his brain is fully functional right now. He took two massive hits that are probably both concussions.
Yeah, it didn't look great. I was surprised when he came back into the game that quickly against Houston. Other side of the ball, the Jets offense. There's a lot of controversy around the Jets offense this week with Nathaniel Hackett was going to get fired. It ended up being Robert Saleh that got fired. Nathaniel Hackett's staying, but he might not be calling plays. It might be Josh Downing. But it's probably just going to be Aaron Rodgers calling the plays like it always is. So that's a unit that has been disappointing. Right? They had the good week against New England. It's similar to what we talked about with Dallas. It's Rodgers. We see with these quarterbacks when they get up there in age, Rodgers is over 40. You just don't want to take hits. So it results in you're getting rid of the ball super quick. We saw it with Brady. We saw it with Breeze. We saw it with Roethlisberger. We saw it with Manning. Aaron Rodgers' average time to throw right now is 2.5 seconds. And it's one thing if that is leading to quick throws to open receivers. But kind of similar to Dak, he's forcing a lot of tight window stuff. And his accuracy hasn't been great. Right? He was missing some of these throws in the Minnesota game behind Lazard. That got popped up, could have been picked, behind Garrett Wilson. And both Garrett Wilson and Allen Lazard are among the top 10 wide receivers in the league in tight window targets. Allen Lazard being on that list is kind of funny just because if you look at the names on this list, it's wide receiver 1, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 1, and then it's Allen Lazard.
Special bond with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, which Aaron Rodgers trusts Allen Lazard with his life. Debatable on whether he should. He has 6 drops this year. It's the most of any wide receiver in the league. But it's a lot of tight window throws that aren't leading to yards after the catch opportunities, aren't creating big plays downfield. They can't get anything going in the run game. Braylon Allen has 3 of his 197 rushing yards or whatever it is this year are before contact. There's no holes there. It's tough to watch right now.
Yeah. No, I think I was going to bring up the run point. We're talking to our colleague Seth Galina about this. It's just the Jets' perfectly blocked run rate. A perfectly blocked run is when no coverage player makes a mistake as defined by our offensive line grades. They're dead last in that area. Cannot create a perfectly blocked run. And you're not going to have success if you're getting hit behind the line, to your point. And that's the recipe to beat the Bills, right, or at least to beat them defensively. You're probably not going to win on these boundary routes, right? They've done a great job of limiting explosive plays. We've talked about that for a couple of weeks now on this show. And hey, look, if I know anything about the Jets organization, I sense some reinforcements are coming. But I don't know if the hamstring injury is made up or not. But I wouldn't be so shocking to me if they have some new faces there at wide receiver to help them out. But I'm not sure this is the spot against Buffalo where that's going to matter anyway.
Yeah, there's 2 pathways. One is they figure out the run game and they're able to run the ball. which to an extent, Braylon Allen has been able to run the ball. He's third in rushing grade for us. He's had more success than Breece Hall, because the Bills are set up to take away those explosives, a lot of light boxes, a lot of too high, heavy. They're one of the biggest nickel personnel teams in the league, which brings me to my next way to beat the Bills defense, and that is you get Garrett Wilson in the slot. And Teron Johnson has played 7 snaps this year. He's been out since week 1. There's a chance he comes back. I think he's starting to practice. But Cam Lewis has been filling in there in the slot for him. He's given up, I believe it's the second most receptions of any player in the NFL so far this season. That linebacking core is susceptible in coverage. That's something that they do a little bit with Wilson already, is about 34% of his routes are in the slot, and he's had more success there than he has outside. So either the run game picks up or you get a super high Garrett Wilson slot target game and try to take advantage of the matchup that way.
Yeah, I think that's right. Although it's another interesting point of just like, especially as the changes, like in the head coaching, like we could see him go to like a 70% share. Like it's one thing to just like be like, hey, I think for whatever reason, like a team's going to go off their tendency by 40% in this week for whatever reason. That's unreasonable, right? That's probably not going to happen. That's like, we like to talk about coaching your bets. You don't want to coach your bet. Like, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there is a non-zero chance that they're like doing a complete overhaul in the front office, and they're saying like, hey, let's change this thing, or not the front office, the coaching staff, whatever it might be. That would be interesting. That's a great live angle, I think, also, and it's a Monday night game. We'll be able to see he's lining up in the slot, and if you're subscribed to PFF, I believe you can access that data live as of a couple weeks ago. So I would do that. I wasn't even told to plug that.
Yeah, no, there you go.
Coming out in real. It's
company man, Company man.
Yeah, exactly.
That is, we did begin opening live grading, so you can see snap counts, you can see some of the preliminary grades, some of the data, anything that's in premium stats with a PFF Plus subscription. That'll be live during the game. It'll get locked back down about 45 minutes after the game for the review process. So anything that's live isn't final, but it can give you an idea of what's going on and help be a tool for live betting, which I like. I kind of like that angle for this game, is seeing what this looks like through the early stages and hitting some things live. I think the one thing that I'm confident on going into the game, I like Josh Allen rushing overs in this game. Because the Jets get pressure, because they're banged up at the Bills are banged up at receiver. You've got a good pass defense, and we've seen it the last couple weeks. Like, it's one of these scenarios where this is a really important game. If the Jets win, they're first in the AFC East. The Bills are trying to keep that lead, and it's a spot where I can see Allen going superhero mode, whether or not he should, given the concussion discussion we had earlier.
Yeah, I like that too. I think kind of the two ways I would bet this game. If you do like the Jets, I think take there, and you don't mind tying up money. I think the division odds are probably the best bet here. I think we see a pretty drastic move, and I was seeing some 350s earlier at the time of this recording. Hopefully by the time this comes out, it won't have moved too much. But another way, and we didn't touch on this, is the Bills have been very vulnerable defending running backs. They're allowing by far the highest targets, receptions, receiving yards. This is the type of area that the Jets can rely on both of their running backs. And maybe it's kind of the path to success is like Breece Hall breaking a big receiving gain. We've seen that a bunch. Maybe it's Braylon Allen. The Jets have been fine to utilize their backs, and that's exactly how you kind of want to how to beat the Bills defense. Building an SGP around those two guys or one of those alts is something that's particularly appealing to me.
I've gotten burned by the Breece Hall receiving stuff the last couple of weeks. I've gone to the well, and I've touched
never wrong, just early. Yeah. That's what we always say. You got to keep going.
I gotta keep going. I gotta put it past me. All right. Let's do some SGPs. What other games on this slate are drawing your eye? What other angles are you looking at?
Yeah, New England and Houston here is one that I like. New England's played a ton of man coverage. CJ Stroud leads the NFL in expected points added against man coverage. Granted, some of that is Nico Collins. He's out. But I think we got to turn back to Tank Dell. Tank Dell has been hurt this year, but he's finally back to full health. And this is a guy who was dominating man coverage last season. One of the best separators, looking yards per route run, any sort of wide receiver efficiency metric. His target rate was very high against man. I believe it was in the upper 20s. He's going to, I think, step into that role and be the recipient of the deep pass. And I think CJ Stroud is the type of quarterback who is really, really, really good when things are kind of kept clean. And has some good creation ability, but that's kind of his fatal flaw is like he can't create in the same way that Allen or Mahomes can. And this is the by far worst pass rush that he's gone up against. I think he will have plenty of time in the pocket, and that works especially with this kind of deep angle that he likes to throw deep. One of the highest deep passing rates, and that's exactly where Tank Dell can kind of beat you on the field. You add up that man angle, the fact that this is the worst pass rush that the Texans have faced. He should have plenty of time. I love that spot for Stroud and Dell.
You've got the potential that New England has some more spunk with Drake May in there too. So.
Oh yeah. I'm very curious about that game. Maybe it would have been a fun one to talk about, but maybe recapping Drake May next week is the path to go. Who doesn't want to hear riveting analysis of the New England Patriots?
Yeah.
It's the stuff that the football nerd.
The most interesting team in football right now.
That's right. All right, the next spot, speaking of rookie quarterbacks, I'm going to be on Spencer Rattler and his alts and the Saints alts. Right, now I'm really confident. Maybe I should just have you kind of give out the case here. But, right, I think there's always an argument for rookie quarterbacks and the uncertainty that they have. And, like, I think that's fine. I won't kind of doubt you on the argument of, like, hey, Jaden Daniels might be really good. Let's be early to that. But I think more fundamental here and why it's not just, like, an auto play is that I think a lot, and we've talked about this on this podcast a bunch, the Saints offensive scheme has done a great job at kind of elevating or creating a good situation, however you want to call it. I think most notably we talked about this in how they're dealing with the offensive line trouble, right? Well, one of the kind of global or macro phenomenons of 2024, or at least one that I'm eyeing, is like, how are certain offensive coordinators and play callers getting around bad offensive lines, right? So you have the Miami example, where when Tua Tagovailoa is in there, they're throwing in 2.3 seconds, right? They don't have a good offensive line. They don't face a lot of quick pressure. The Packers, again, do not have a great offensive line on paper. For 2 years running now, they've faced the least amount of pressure. It is schematic. Same thing can be said about the 49ers. And New Orleans has done a great job in that category as well. Also seeing a bottom five quick pressure rate. It is not because their offensive line is really good. These are guys who we had graded as one of the worst in the NFL. They had them as the 31st best unit coming into the season. They all didn't magically get better, right? There is some schematic element there. And that gives me a little bit more confidence in betting on a quarterback who's entering into what could be a very good situation. Add on the fact that, like, his passing yards, they're not up at the time of this recording. I'm guessing it's going to be somewhere in the 180, 190 range. When you've got Olave and Shaheed and you can take some of these deep shots against a defense that's extremely vulnerable, Todd Bowles has allowed a top 5 explosive play rate basically every year he's been in Tampa. And there are plenty of pathways to accumulating yardage. If Spencer Rattler's good, if he's even like the system is very good behind him, such that he can succeed, given the anticipated market pricing. Maybe that's a little bit of a weak claim, the anticipated market pricing, but I think that's a spot that I'm going to be on.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, we just saw Kirk go for 500 plus against this Tampa Bay defense, and Spencer, I'm a fan of his potential in terms of Rattler. I think he showed some good things in the preseason, and the Saints' offensive line has been the Saints have been allowing more pressure the last couple of weeks, and they're just really beat up on the interior. Right, you're going down to like third stringers. You got Nick Saldiveri coming in at left guard because your backup center got hurt, so Lucas Patrick has to go to center, and it's been a mess there, but. That's not new for Spencer Rattler. The South Carolina offensive line was an absolute disaster. So I think he's got some playmaking ability, and I think he'll take some chances downfield. To your point on what should be a low line, I like it.
Yeah. So we got Tank Dell, we got Spencer Rattler. My last one's going to be sticking with this young quarterback team, Caleb Williams and the Chicago passing offense. Number one, I think Caleb Williams has gotten significantly better over the course of the season. It's one thing for that to kind of happen to any 60-year quarterback who's just like had a bad 2 games and then a next good, 3 good ones after that. It's another thing for that to happen to a rookie quarterback, especially one with kind of the pedigree of Caleb Williams. I want to kind of give a little more credence to the fact that he could be getting better. And it's not as you can make the argument, he just played the Panthers. Jaguars aren't that much better on defense. And not only that, but we can bet on efficiency, we can bet on volume. And the Jaguars have been pretty good in rush defense. And the big play ability, Caleb Williams has thrown deep a ton. The results have not been there yet. But something we've even talked about a bunch is that wide receiver play is really what influences a lot of deep passing. And I think as you've gotten all their guys healthy, Odunze's healthy, Keenan Allen's back, also doing a great job separating, pretty incredible at his age, and DJ Moore as well. And I see this as a spot against a very vulnerable Jacksonville secondary, a pass funnel at that, and Caleb Williams as a quarterback who baked into his pricing right now is a couple of week 2 games, which frankly I think are not the relevant sample because he's gotten better. The Bears are throwing more, and this is a extremely beatable matchup. I love the alts in that spot as well.
I'll use that to transition to my first key insight because it's in the same game. And I'm kind of the inverse. I'm going DeAndre Swift rushing unders for some of the similar reasons. Swift is 28th among running backs in yards after contact per carry. Jacksonville's 3rd in yards after contact per carry allowed. They've been a pretty good run defense, a very beatable pass defense. And Swift is coming off his 2 biggest games of the season. Right after the talk about Roschon Johnson potentially stealing more work, that hasn't really been the case. But I think this is a spot where Chicago's going to look to win via the pass. At the time we're recording, I haven't seen the Swift line yet, so TBD on what that actually is. But I think it's going to be a spot where I like the under there. And then another running back prop that is intriguing, Javonte Williams as a receiver. Against the Chargers. And that's something that we've seen with Sean Payton offenses. Like in New Orleans, running back's a big part of the passing game. Last year with Russell Wilson, running back target rate was highest in the NFL, I believe, for the Broncos. And you're seeing it again this year. And there is some Jaleel McLaughlin in there, but I believe Javonte Williams is out targeting him 2-1 this season, coming off a pretty big game against the Raiders last week as a receiver. He's 4th among running backs in target rate. The Chargers defense has allowed the 3rd most running back targets in the league, and that's with a bye. And I think they're 31st in total targets faced. So they're allowing a high volume of running back targets. I think it's a good spot for Williams as a receiver in that game.
Yeah. Have you even seen Bo Nix be a quarterback who likes to target his running back dating back to his time in college? Yeah, love that spot.
That's all we got. Any closing thoughts for us before we get this beautiful Week 6 slate out?
No, I'm ready. I'm ready for more football. I feel like I've talked about this before, but it's worth mentioning again. It's like the weekly process to me is like hilarious. Where Monday night I'm like, okay, get a rest. Tuesday, like mostly doing prep. Great. By this time Wednesday afternoon, I'm just like, man, like I want the next slate of football.
We're ready.
Let's get it. So
it's coming.
I'm excited. Should be a fun one.
Enjoy it, man.